Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Can you hear me now? Yeah. All right. My name is Hondo Shagwa. I'm a member of the Rebuild Collective, which is a New African Independence Movement formation. And we work with the Jericho movement. This is my comrade Steve. He was an Illinois prisoner for over 36 years in prison at the age of 15. And he's just one of many we know who, if they weren't political when they went in, they developed politics. Started to relate more to the independence movement, started to relate more to the movement for freedom, justice, and equality for everybody. And this is my sister comrade, Kathy Manley.
Kathy Manley, I'm the legal director of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, and we support mainly Muslims who were entrapped and set up after 9/11 and like the war on terror, so-called prosecutions, who were called terrorists but really weren't terrorists, or set up in sting operations, charged with material support, fake conspiracy cases, sentenced to decades, sometimes life in prison. So, all right, I'll start. So I got involved in this work back in 2004. I'm an attorney, and I was working for a firm, and we ended up representing a man named Yassin Arif, who was a Kurdish Iraqi imam in Albany, New York. I'm from Albany, New York. And he was charged with his co-defendant, another Muslim man, with material support to terrorism in a sting operation where my client, Yassin, didn't even know anything illegal was going on. He was just witnessing alone. The FBI was very tricky, and we fought that case really hard. I don't have time to go into it too much, but that was how I got introduced to this work. They got convicted. They would have gotten sentenced to 30 years, but we organized. We started the Muslim Solidarity Committee, worked with the Muslim community in Albany, and we managed to get 15 years, which still really sucked, but it was better than 30 years because now they finished that sentence. We fought it all along, actually, but we were unsuccessful in getting them out, but they finished their sentences, and now they're out. We actually visited Yassin in Iraqi Kurdistan last January, and he's doing really well, and his kids are here. One of them became a lawyer and was my intern and helped get somebody else out, so that was nice. But so after that case, we formed a group called Project Salam, and then in 2010, we met up with a Palestinian political prisoner named Sami al-Aryan, and he had been in a case where they went after him really hard on conspiracy charges and tried to say that he was like supporting Palestinian Islamic Jihad and all this stuff, and he fought that case at trial and actually won pretty much everything, beat all the charges. There was a mistrial on a couple of minor charges, and then they kept going after him, so they filed new charges in Virginia, and it's a long story, but we got a couple of his supporters here, and his case was in Tampa, Fred and Mel here. So basically, while Sammy was under house arrest in Virginia, facing these new charges, he started our group, Coalition for Civil Freedoms. He brought together people from all over the country in different cases where Muslims had been targeted in these post 9/11 prosecutions, and so we've been working with them ever since. And what we do, I'm the legal director, so I do a lot of legal motions and support the prisoners, give them legal advice. I'm in touch with we have 200 on our support list. I'm in touch with a lot of them. And we also work with the families. We bring the family members together in a conference every year and try to get them. We have, actually was started by Sammy, and then his daughter was our executive director for quite a while, and she's still involved. And one of the other people that's our family coordinator her son was entrapped in a case and was sentenced to something like 30 years, probably a really long time. And so we involve the family members directly and try to help organize and educate people about these kinds of cases. And there's, I guess, two main like tools that the government uses to go after them. There's other ones too, but I'll just mention the two main ones, which is entrapment, right? Sting operations, where the FBI sends informants into mosques, into, they just target young people, vulnerable people, and they try to get them to say something bad on tape, right? And then once they get them to say something bad on tape, they'll arrest them and charge them with trying to do something, even though they weren't gonna do anything before the FBI, they weren't gonna do anything anyway, but before the FBI started pushing them, showing them videos of atrocities, things like that. So a lot of these cases are sting operations. And another tool that they use a lot, and they used against Carlos Montes here, is the material support to terrorism laws, right? So they can charge somebody with material support to terrorism just for any kind of communication, even any kind of what they call aid, but it can just be that you're talking to somebody, that maybe you're writing an op-ed talking about how unfair this situation is, but if you are what they call coordinating with a designated group, which is just any group the US doesn't like, basically, they put on this list, then you can be convicted of material support to terrorism without they don't even need to prove any intent to support anything violent, right? And so actually that was challenged in a case called the Humanitarian Law Project. Way back in 1998, there was a group, the Humanitarian Law Project. They were trying to work with groups who were like the Tamil Tigers and the PKK in Turkey, and trying to help them negotiate to resolve their grievances peacefully. And so they thought, we don't want to get charged with material support, so we're going to file this case, and the court will, at that time they thought, say, oh yeah, all right, well you're okay, you can do that. Well, that's not what happened. By the time that case got to the Supreme Court in 2010, after 9/11 and everything, because they filed it before 9/11, the Supreme Court said, yep, they can get you on that, yep. Doesn't have to, you can be very peaceful, doesn't matter, as long as you're talking to this designated group, then you can be convicted of material support to terrorism, as long as that group's on the list, basically. So a lot of the people that we advocate for get convicted on material support charges too. And it's pretty hard to fight that. Carlos beat it, yes. But yeah, we have him on our support list too, and people supported him. But one of the worst examples, I'll talk about a couple examples of material support cases, and then also the sting cases. There's also like conspiracy, guilt by association cases and other kinds of things, but probably the worst example of the material support case is the Holy Land Foundation case. And this was a group very relevant right now because they were the largest Muslim charity in the US, and they're Palestinian, and they were raising money to support people all over the world in desperate need, but also in Gaza. They were sending money to support civilians in Gaza, desperately needed, anything for schools or hospitals, anything, construction materials. It was all peaceful. And they gave that money to the same zakat committees, they're called, in Gaza that distributed money. And this was even before Hamas won the election. They were giving money to these same zakat committees that the International Red Cross and the U.S. Agency for International Development. So the U.S. government was giving money to these same groups, but for these guys, because they were Palestinian, there's a case filed against them saying they're guilty of material support to terrorism because they really wanted to support Hamas, even though they weren't giving the money to Hamas. So they're taking the law and twisting it even farther than this bad law already was. And their first trial was a mistrial, but then they tried again. They weren't going to give up. They were really, Zionists really were coming and pushing the government to go after them. And they had anonymous Israeli expert testifying on the stand anonymously that they could smell Hamas in this group. That's evidence in a fucking U.S. court. But they got convicted, and the two leaders of the group, Ghassan Alashi, one of the most wonderful humanitarian people I've ever met, and his co-defendant, Shukri Abubakar, another really wonderful person. Actually, I'm in touch with him more now. they get sentenced to 65 years, and they were already like middle-aged, so that's a life sentence for them. Then there was 3 other people that got lesser terms. They're mostly out. There's one, Abdulrahman Oda, who'll get out in another couple of years. But these guys, Shukri and Ghassan, they're not getting out unless we get them out somehow. So we're trying, but it's very difficult. And then another material support case is the case of Tariq Mahana out of Boston. And he was translating some materials into Arabic and putting it on the internet, and it was maybe edgy material, whatever, but he wasn't even coordinating with any designated terrorist organization. But the government argued that because he was putting it on the internet and they could download it from the internet, that was coordination with the designated terrorist organization. Like, that's insane. And he went to trial, and it was a little unclear what the jury found as far as that or another theory, which he didn't do it anyway. But he got convicted, he went to the appeal and lost. He got 17 years. 17, and he gave this amazing speech, if anybody remembers, at his sentencing. Must have been like 14, 15 years ago by now. Yeah, I feel old. But he gave this amazing speech, and he talked about, you know, that Muslims have a right to resist U.S. wars when they're waged on their countries, and talked about how, yes, also you're supposed to have free speech, and you should be able to do this. And, you know, and he talked about, like, the U.S. war against the British, and, like, likened it to, anyway, it was a great speech. And it was like somebody recorded it and put it out on the internet, so it got out there. But he's still strong. Even though, you know, he did his whole sentence, he's actually being released to a halfway house in a couple of weeks, so that's still very, very strong. And then there's, I'll talk about a couple more cases, but there's a really sad case of the Fort Dix 5 out of New Jersey. 3 brothers, Dri Tanduka, his brother Elvier, and his brother Shane, and then Serdar Tatar and Mohammed Shnur, who's Palestinian. It was kind of a complicated case, but the 3 Duka brothers, they were entrapped by 2 different informants, and they were entrapped into a plot that they didn't even know about. They wanted to buy guns because they liked shooting guns at this rifle range, and they already served those sentence for the gun charges like 10 years ago. But they got entrapped in this plot that they didn't know about, that supposedly the other informant and Mohammed Shnur was entrapped into a plot where they were talking about attacking Fort Dix, which he wasn't really. The informant was trying to push that on Mohammed, but the Duka brothers didn't even know about it. The informant even testified that the Duka brothers didn't know about that, but they still got convicted of conspiracy to murder people somewhere in the world. Maybe it was Fort Dix at some time, someplace, unknown, and that was upheld in federal court, and they got life sentences for 3 brothers. Since then, their dad passed away a few years ago, their mom is sick, their younger brother is struggling to support the family. So we gotta do something for them too. Dritan Duka and his 2 brothers, life sentences. And then this is another sad case, not a life sentence, but Rezwan Ferdos was an engineering student in Boston who became really mentally ill, maybe schizophrenia or maybe something like, I'm not sure exactly what his diagnosis was, but he became so mentally ill that he wouldn't leave his house. He started wearing diapers. His father retired early to take care of him. And then this informant befriended him and became his only friend and kept working on him and getting him to agree on some plot with like a remote controlled helicopter to blow something up. And his father finally convinced him to get help. He started seeing a psychiatrist. he started taking medication, and as soon as that happened, before he started actually getting better, the FBI knew this, and they knew he was mentally ill. They swooped in and arrested him before he could get better and tell this guy to get lost. And he got 23 years, I think, I forget how many. He got a long time. We are actually currently working on a motion for compassionate release for him based on his mental illness and the unfairness of the case. So that is one of the sort of silver linings is that since 2020, we have had a tool to at least, because the law is so bad that we couldn't go after a lot of these things legally. I'm a lawyer, I was like trying to figure it out, but the government, the US government passed the First Step Act in 2019, and that allows for compassionate release motions to reduce a sentence for any extraordinary and compelling reason. So in 2020, we started filing all these COVID motions, like to get people out based on the risk from COVID. And we won release for 3 people back then. One, Sammy Hassoun here in Chicago. Our other attorney did that, and he's doing well. He got to be deported, but he's in Lebanon now. He's in Turkey, I think, which is probably better for him right now. So he's doing well. And then we had 2 cases out of Minneapolis, 2 co-defendants, Hawel Hassan and Amna Ali, who were not entrapped. There was a material support case to Al-Shabaab where they were trying to help refugees. And so we won their release also in Minneapolis a few years ago. And then just recently we had probably our biggest victory, which was the case of the Newburgh Four out of New York, upstate New York. And that was a case that proves that there is no such thing as the entrapment defense, because they're supposed to be like, if they're trying to entrap you and they offer you money, then the government's supposed to prove that you were already predisposed to support terrorism before they gave you that money. But the way it works is they say if the informant gets you to say bad things on tape to get that money, like James Cromedy in this case, he would say, oh yeah, I'm a terrorist, sure, just give me that $250,000. Like he was trying to con the informant. The informant was really conning him. If you say those things, then the judge tells the jury, that proves you were predisposed because you said that, right? But you said that to get the money. So there is no entrapment defense. So these guys got sentenced because of the way the FBI structured that case. They got sentenced to a mandatory minimum of 25 years. And the judge knew, the judge, Colleen McMahon, this is in the Southern District of New York, she called this the unterrorism case. She knew it was unfair, but she didn't throw out the verdict. She could have. It would have been maybe a stretch legally, but she could have if she had the guts, but she didn't do that. And so she sentenced them to 25 years. She felt like she had no choice. And they had no interest in anything except they wanted this money. That was it. That's like the definition of entrapment. Like they weren't even really Muslim. They were a little bit Muslim. They didn't really know anything about Islam. Unlike some of these other guys, who were very upset about what was happening to Muslims. These guys, they just wanted that money. They had nothing. They had no driver's licenses. They had been in prison themselves earlier. They were released. They didn't mostly have jobs. They were trying to put their lives together. David Williams, one of them, needed money because his brother needed an operation on his liver. What we did, we filed a compassionate release motion arguing to the judge that, yeah, you felt like you had to give them that mandatory minimum, but now, under the First Step Act, you can say that was too long, and you can let them out, saying that the case was unfair, and that was the extraordinary and compelling reason. It wasn't medical reasons, it wasn't COVID, it was because that sentence was too long to begin with. She did not reverse the convictions, but after the motion was pending for 18 months, and I started to think nothing was gonna happen, in the end of July, she granted it. So she ordered their release. She said, wait 3 months. And then, so Auntie Williams got released. David Williams had a little weed case for a couple months more, so he gets out in January. But this is like, they would have had like another 11, 12 years more to do of that sentence. They still served a long time. But, so we won release for 3 of them. The other guy, we have to deal with some other stuff, but that was a big victory, and it was an excellent decision. Alright, so, yeah, I'll just hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You did a great presentation.